Good morning, welcome to my channel. My name is David Okun, and thank you everyone for supporting me. Those who have subscribed my channel, those who have shared with family, watching the video, supporting in whatever way you can, and also clicking the notification bell, leaving a comment, sharing your views with us, and clicking like. Today I will talk about Uganda. In East Africa, Uganda is a country in East Africa. It's in Africa, in the eastern part of Africa. Is potentially one of the richest country in the world. Uganda potentially is one of the richest countries in the world. And the foreign secretary of the colonies, the British foreign secretary Winston Churchill, who later became the British Prime Minister. When he came to Africa, into Uganda, he described Uganda as the pearl of Africa, which means there was no country, in his opinion, to better Uganda in terms of beauty resources. Equator, which is an imaginary line, passes via Kenya, Uganda, and the Congo, and also northern Brazil. These regions are, naturally they're the wealthiest part of the globe. And Uganda is so privileged to be part of the equatorial belt with the best of tropical forests, minerals, and arable land. Arable land means the land you can grow food, you can grow crop, you can grow pretty much anything can be grown in Uganda with adequate rainfalls. In spite of also the climate change under which the earth, particularly Africa, is undergoing. And Africa is within the tropics. It's a tropical region, which means there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of sunshine, but you also find extreme weathers, including the Sahara Desert. It's extremely hot. Africa is very hot. It's full of malaria, full of all the diseases now because the climate is so conducive for wildlife, for life generally, including wildlife, including diseases. There's so many diseases in Africa. And Africa is such a beautiful country. If you are visit Africa, visit Uganda. Uganda is the pearl of Africa. It is the best of the best, the cream. But now, because of politics, because of the problem to do with colonialism, with its history, the violence and other turbulence, Uganda is one of the poorest countries in the world. One of the poorest countries in the world, which is a critical indictment on a country and on a continent. But also, I'm going to talk about Uganda. This is the second video on Uganda. Watch the other ones. The first one on Uganda and also the rest of the videos on East Africa. But also, I made some videos on Africa. If you miss them, watch them. We are lucky enough to watch it. We are a small channel, so we are struggling for viewership. But that is also the nature of YouTube, and we get a lot of support from our fans. There are very few, but the ones who are few are actually committed. Somehow, the topic we are discussing, we have only about 34%, 35% of our viewers are women, females. The rest are actually about 65% are actually males. So it's predominantly male. It's a male preferred subject. It's also the people who view my channel the most are actually between 50s and 60s. So this is the age bracket of people who, young people really don't like my channel very much. The young people up to, I think, 24, and between 24 and 35, I think are okay. Between 35 and 40 something, may like it. It's average. The average is actually okay, except the total viewership is quite of videos is quite low. Our plans is that more and more people get used to our channel and visit a little bit more. We suffer the problem of visibility So if you like our material, or if you don't like it, leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about Uganda, continue to talk about Uganda, but I will link it as always to the cost of living. Cost of living is a major global crisis affecting especially poor people. Unfortunately, poor people and countries sometimes do not want to be referred to as poor. But you see, life is about reality. Life is about reality. And if you work for a living, if you have to rely on credit, like Africa rely on borrowing money from Europe and other parts of the world, it's something called foreign aid. Without that, Africa will struggle to even exist. And the same with nation states across the globe, including in Europe and America, Australia, New Zealand, almost everywhere now, is being controlled by the banks of Europe, incidentally, and most of these banks, actually all of them are private bankers. So the private individuals are the one running the world. There's something called privatization. That is actually a key ingredient of capitalism, which is, in my opinion, responsible for the cost of living crisis. Because the cost of living crisis is actually a poverty problem. If you're poor, it means you work for a living. If you don't work, you won't survive. And more, the government, the state is selling off the countries of the world, including Uganda, my country, where I come from. I'm East African, I'm Ugandan. African, I live in England, in the UK, and I've been here for a while, but you wouldn't guess because my Africanness remained with me. So I'm so passionate being Africa. Some things never leave you. It doesn't matter how long you stay away. So I'm very African in every sense of the word, and I'm privileged to talk about Africa, Uganda in particular. If you are Ugandan, if you are an African, if you are a fan of Africa, then be my guest and leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And apart from the cost of living and a lot of other problems, there are problems everywhere in the world. We can sit here and talk about problems, or just talk about strategic approaches to try and consider problems. Because if there are problems, it's our responsibility to solve it. We can choose to do nothing. But see, if you follow my discussion on this, in this process, I have consistently said the government is no longer helping people. It used to, but it used to help people through the public sector. Once the public sector is closed, like it is now being closed, even in Africa, in Uganda, things like education, health, employment, public transport, including flying on the airplanes. It's a part of public service. But all of them are sold to private companies. These private companies are multi-billionaires and multi-billionaires. And they're so rich, they just buy this thing, and if it doesn't make profit, they shut it down. So the healthcare system across the globe is in a crisis. Food supply, energy supply, housing is a major problem across the globe, especially in the developed world, for the majority of the population who work for living, because they can't build, because it's so expensive, they can't build houses. They cannot also buy unless they borrow money. And more and more, or less and less, so to speak, the credit companies are no longer giving credit, because they're shutting it down. They're only giving it to the super rich. So the globe and its economy is rigged in favor of the few who are multimillionaires and multi-billionaires, and rigged against the many. This information is critical. It's a survival kind of information. If you are to survive now, and if you have family, children, and maybe family, sibling, friends, or people you care about, pay attention to the idea of survivability, because we used to depend on the government. Government no longer help the poor, who are actually the 90 to 95% of the global population. They are on their own, because people in government have shut down the public sector. I keep seeing this over and over. And I will be saying it over and over. I won't get tired because getting tired is a mistake. Because what I'm saying, I'm very clear about. People, my invitation to people to those who are viewing this video to talk about it elsewhere, do think about it elsewhere, and or talk about it here, think about it here. Whatever you're going to do, you have to really take responsibility for your life, whether you're a child, an adult, whether you are. Some people actually are working as middle class workers who are actually doing fairly okay. And don't be deceived that being a middle class, if you are earning maybe 40,000, 50,000, maybe 100,000 pounds or dollars in a year, if you work for a living, some people just lose track of who they are as employees or as citizens, because the main source of income is actually employment, and there may be other form of income, such as maybe state benefit. Like I said previously, these things are closed down. Whatever is left is just a cleanup operation, because they are shutting it down, and small and medium businesses in the private sector is closing down also. So if you are poor, including the public sector and small and medium businesses, you are going to be closed down. And if you work for a living, you are actually in the lower, in the middle class, you are going to be excluded from society in terms of wealth and in terms of everything. And potentially you're going to die if you're not careful, because it's going to be like a jungle. Nobody's going to care about anybody. And unfortunately, people do not take time. I don't think people take this situation seriously. The reason there is a lot of violence within capitalism is because of cultural failure. See, society are poorly educated. Most people may not believe it, but if they don't believe it, that's their problem. My responsibility to say is that the reason there is a cost of living because of violence, because of capitalism, which has become violent, is right wing, is extreme, and it is culturally uneducated, including in Uganda. No, there are multi-millionaires and multi-billionaires in Uganda, but they don't share their wealth with anybody. They don't have any ideas how to strengthen people to get them out of poverty. My proposition to anybody wanting peace anywhere in the world is to work to get out of poverty as an individual or as a group. You can, as campaigners or as participants in the economy, maybe running small and medium businesses, especially in Africa, especially in Uganda. Do that. If you do that, you're going to survive. Otherwise, you're going to go escape. Simple as that. Because the market system is a jungle, and until the government realizes this danger and change their policy across the globe, I'm talking about globalization as well, because what happens nationally happens globally these days, and it's going to be more and more, because we are going from nation states to global states, to a global state. Happening in Africa, happening in East Africa. There's East African Union, which is actually similar to African Union, and we are probably going to have a global union. People need to understand this is politics and government. You stay ignorant, that is your choice. And you're ignorant, you're going to suffer. Everybody suffers, but for most people, they strive to finish well in life. You need to have control over your life, and you need to have accurate information. I've gone on and on and on. I offer no apology at all, because I am doing the right thing. And I believe that you who are watching are doing the right thing. Subscribe to this channel if you like what you hear. There are long programs because they are complicated information. Pay close attention, watch as much as you can, but whatever you can get it. I'm going to look at Uganda. I'm going to look at independence between 1962 to 1965. When we talk of independence, I mean British colonized Uganda. and Uganda got independence. Independence means we got free from Britain, the British imperialism, also known as colonialism. Uganda gained independence from the UK on 9th October 1962, with Queen Elizabeth II as head of the state and Queen of Uganda. God save the Queen, and rest in peace, and God save the King, and King Charles III, and may Our Majesty the Queen rest in peace. I don't know if she's this Our Majesty the Queen, but however she is, formally to us, she will always be our Queen, and may she rest in peace. And she gave us independence in 1962. In October 1963, Uganda became a republic and maintained its membership of the British Commonwealth as in the Commonwealth of Nations. The first post-independence election held in 1962 was won by an alliance between the Uganda People's Congress and the KY, or the Kabaka Yeka. The Kabaka Yeka was actually a political party of the kingdom of Uganda, which was actually when the British came into operation to colonize Africa, and under that auspices, the Uganda kingdom was actually among the most important kingdoms in Africa, certainly in East Africa, and today still remain as a symbol of glory and prominence by the Baganda, by the Bagandans, by the Baganda people. Baganda people are the most, the majority of actually the proportion of the population in Uganda. So their king, their Kabaka, Kabaka means king. Their Kabaka was actually during colonialism and independence created a political party known KY Kabaka Yeka. Kabaka only. Yeka is only Kabaka only. Because monarchs have absolute authority. So the landscape, political mix of Uganda was complicated at the outset. UBC KY formed the first post-independence government with Milton Obote as executive prime minister, with the Buganda Kabaka King Edward Mutesa II holding the largest ceremonial position as president. His presidency excluded the executive responsibility. The executive responsibility means the head of government. So head government was modeled similarly to what we now have in Britain, prime minister being the executive authority, being head of the government, and the monarchy being head of the country, as it were. And the Kabaka's authority at that time as president was symbolic, he had limited powers comparable to power of the president or the prime minister. So we are looking at the Uganda crisis between 1962 and 1966. The Mengo crisis. Mengo was actually the palace of the Kabaka, the royal palace of the Ugandan monarchy. So we look at the construction of Owen dams, also Owen Falls dams in Jinja, which is one of the biggest electricity generating dams, and it's on the River Nile near Lake Victoria in Uganda. Lake Victoria was named after Queen Victoria, who actually colonized Uganda, and descendant giving independence in the person of Our Majesty at that time, Queen Elizabeth II. So Uganda's immediate post-independence years were dominated by the relationship between the central government and the largest regional kingdom, the Buganda Kingdom. So these were the deciding factors, whether or not there was stability between the two functions. From the moment the British created the Uganda Protectorate, the issue of how to manage the largest monarchy within the framework of a unitary system had always been a problem. Colonial governors had failed to come up with a formula that worked. This was further complicated by Buganda's nonchalant attitude to its relationship with the central government. Uganda never sought independence, but rather appeared to be comfortable with a loose arrangement that guaranteed the privileges above the other subjects within the protectorate or the special status where the British left. This was evidence in part by hostilities between the British colonial authorities and Buganda prior to independence. Within Buganda, there were divisions between those who wanted the Kabaka to remain a dominant monarch and those who wanted to join with the rest of Uganda to create a modern secular state. There were divisions, the pro-monarchy, for the Kabaka, pro-king of Buganda to be the dominant force of rule. So there was a scramble for power, actually. There were actually conflicts. The Kabaka wanted to be the president, essentially, of Uganda. He wanted the Uganda to rule Uganda. And so there was a split. The split resulted in the creation of two dominant-based parties, the Kabaka Yeka, Kabaka Ole, KY, and the Democratic Party, DP, that are roots in the Catholic Church. So the other source of division in Uganda was religion. The Catholic today, actually the majority in Uganda, and at side, they created a political party called the Democratic Party, the DP, which actually, threw into the mix of rivalry between different power brokers. The split resulted in the creation of two. The bitterness between these two parties was extremely intense, especially as the first election for the post-colonial parliament approached. The Kabaka particularly disliked the DP leader, Benedicto Kiwanuka. They didn't get on well. Outside Uganda, a soft-spoken politician from northern Uganda, Milton Obote, had forged an alliance with a non-Ugandan politician, to form the Uganda People's Congress, UPC. The UPC at its heart was dominated by politicians who wanted to rectify what they saw as the regional inequality that favored Uganda's special status. Special status of Uganda was the size of the people, but the relative wealth which was concentrated in its city, which was actually created by the British, making Kampala, which was in Uganda, the capital city, the commercial and the political seat of the country, and this by default favored Uganda at the outset, many being more educated with more commercial rooting in the country, having more opportunity, more money. I think it's a status which it still enjoys to this day. This drew in substantial support from outside Uganda. The party, however, remained a loose alliance of interests, but Obote showed great skill at negotiating them into a common ground based on a federal formula. The Uganda Printers Building on Kampala Road, Uganda. These are some of the infrastructure built during colonialism, modern infrastructures at independence. The Buganda question remained unresolved. Uganda was one of the few colonial territories that achieved independence without a dominant political party with a clear majority in parliament. This unique problem in Uganda actually became an Achilles heel, political Achilles heel, perhaps to this day. And in the pre-independence election, the UPC ran no candidates in Uganda and won 37 of the 61 directly elected seats outside Uganda. The DP won 24 seats outside Uganda. The special status granted to Uganda meant that the 21 Uganda seats were elected by proportional representation reflecting the election to the Uganda Parliament, the Lukiko. The Uganda Parliament is called Lukiko. The KY won a resounding victory over DP, winning all 21 seats. This is a story in Uganda. The UPC reached a high at the end of the 1964 when the leader of the DP in Parliament, Bazdin Kiza, Bataringaya, crossed the parliamentary floor with 5 other MPs, leaving DP with only 9 seats. So UPC became more attractive to many people, so people were crossing over from the other opposition party into the governing party. The coalition there between the UPC and the KY. The DPMPs were not particularly happy that the hostility of their leader, Benedicto Kiwanuka, toward the Kabaka was hindering their chances of compromise with the Kabaka Yeka. The trickle of decision turned into a flood. The trickle of defection turned into a flood when 10 KY members crossed the floor, when the formal coalition with the UPC was no longer viable. So within the governing coalition, the leader of the party, of the Kabaka, or the king of Uganda, the Kabaka Yeka party members crossing over to the main party, the United UPC, Uganda People's Congress. Obote's charismatic speeches across the country were sweeping all before him, and the UPC was winning almost every local election held and increasing its control over all district council and legislature outside Uganda. The charismatic Milton Obote was actually a very effective organizer and also a politician, and this actually gained him popularity and support and eventually power and strength within the UPC. The response from the Kabaka was mute, probably in content in his ceremonial role and symbolism in his part of the country. However, there were also major divisions within his palace that made it difficult for him to act effectively against Obote. By the time Uganda had become independent, Uganda was a divided house with contending social and political forces. There were, however, problems brewing inside the UPC. As it ranked, swell the ethnic, religious, regional, and personal interests began to shake the party. The party's apparent strength was eroded in a complex sequence of factional conflicts in its central and regional structure. Uganda was a newly independent country. Its members in the government were new. They were less than seasoned politicians. Their primary experience was the struggle for independence. So that was a problem in Africa, in experience, and in terms of electoral politics, democracy as a concept and practice was extremely a new concept in Africa. It was a European, perhaps also maybe a Western concept, but this was indirectly imposed by, in many ways, on Africa and in particular Uganda. But in 1966, the UPC was tearing itself apart. The conflict was further intensified by the newcomers who were crossed the parliamentary floor from DP and Kabaka Yeka. So the dynamics were struggling to maintain in the parties, in the government. The UPC delegates arrived in Gulu in 1964 for their delegates conference. Here was the first demonstration as to how Obote was losing control of his party. The battle over the Secretary General of the party was a bitter contest between the new moderate candidate, Grace Ibingira, and the radical John Kakonge. Ibingira subsequently became the symbol of the opposition to Obote within the UPC. The UPC as a governing party became split, notwithstanding their being in the coalition with the Kabaka Yeka. This is an important factor when looking at the subsequent events that led to the crisis between Uganda and the central government. For those outside the UPC, including Kabaka Yeka supporters, this was a sign that Obote was vulnerable. Keen observers realized the UPC was not a cohesive unit. The collapse of the UPC-KY alliance openly revealed the dissatisfaction Obote and others had about Uganda's special status. So the Achilles heel that became the features of the political and social issues in Uganda was always often involving Uganda. the Uganda being a dominant people in Uganda, at any, if there were actually democracy would resemble something in Kenya with one tribe dominating the political scene. In 1964, the government responded to demands from some parts of the vast Uganda kingdom that they were not the Kabaka's subjects. So there was rebellion within the kingdom of Uganda against the king, who was also ceremonial president of Uganda. Prior to colonial rule, Buganda had been rivaled by the neighboring Bunyoro kingdom. Buganda had conquered parts of Bunyoro, and the British colonialists had formalized this in the Buganda agreements. Known as the Lost Counties, the people in these areas wished to revert to being part of Bunyoro. Obote decided to allow a referendum which angered the Kabaka in most of the rest of Uganda. A similar situation now arising between Scotland and England and Great Britain, United Kingdom, because the way Uganda was formulated, the example of how Britain was also created, and they were forced into a country. Different peoples were forced under one country within one border. So the residents of the counties voted to return to Bunyoro despite the Kabaka's attempt to influence the vote. Having lost the referendum, the KY opposed the bill to pass the counties to Bunyoro, thus ending the alliance with the UPC. The alliance broke over the issue of the lost counties of Bunyoro. The tribal nature of Ugandan politics also manifesting itself in the government. The UPC, which had previously been a national party, began to break along tribal lines when Ibingira challenged Obote in the UPC. The North-South ethnic divide that had been evident in economic and social spheres now entrenched itself in politics. Obote surrounded himself with mainly northern politicians, A.A. Nekion, Felix Onama, Alex Ojera, while Ibingira's supporters, who were subsequently arrested and jailed with him, were mainly from the south: George Magezi, B. Kiria, and Matthias Nobi. In time, the two factions acquired ethnic labels: Bantu, the mainly southern Ibingira faction, and Nilotic, the mainly northern Obote faction. The perception that the government was at war with the Bantu was further enhanced when Obote arrested and imprisoned the mainly Bantu minister who backed Ibingira. These labels brought into the mix two very powerful influences. First, Buganda, the people of Buganda are Bantu, and therefore naturally they align to the Ibingira faction. The Ibingira faction further advanced this alliance by accusing Obote of wanting to overthrow the Kabaka. They were now aligned to opposing Obote. Second, the security forces, the British colonialists, had recruited the army and police almost exclusively from northern Uganda due to their perceived suitability for these roles. At independent, the army and the police were dominated by a northern tribe, mainly Nilotic. They would now feel more affiliated to Obote, and he took full advantage of his to consolidate his power. In April 1966, Obote passed out 800 new recruits at Moreto, of whom 70% came from the northern region. At the time, there was a tendency to perceive central government and security forces as dominated by northerners, particularly the actually who, through the UPC, had significant access to government positions at national level. In northern Uganda, there were also varied degrees of anti-Buganda feeling, particularly over the kingdom's status as special status before and after independence, and all the economic and social benefits that came with this status. Obote brought significant numbers of the northerners into the central state, both through the civil service and military, and created a patronage machine in northern Uganda. However, both Bantu and Nilotic labels represent significant ambiguities. The Bantu categories, for example, include both Buganda and Bunyoro, historically bitter rivals. The Nilotic label include the Lubara, Acholi, and the Langi, all of whom bitter rivalries that were to decline defined Uganda's military politics later. Despite these ambiguities, these events unwittingly brought to fore the northern southern political divide, which to some extent still influences Ugandan politics to this day. The UPC fragmentation continued as a component sense of Obote's vulnerability. At the local level, where the UPC dominated, most council discontent began to challenge incumbent council leaders. Even in Obote's home district, attempts were made to host the head of the local district council in 1966. There were other factors playing part in the divide. Christianity, the DP, the Democratic, mainly the opposition party, were most of them the members of the Catholic Church. And across that was probably the one single most powerful factor of division in Ugandan society and politics. Something which is also similar, in the United Kingdom with Ireland and Northern Ireland, and this religious conflict, and also the tribalism in Uganda, which is actually a form of racism, racial tension, racial divides. A more worrying fact for the UPC was that the next national election loomed in 1967, and without the support of Kabaka Yeka, who are now likely to back the DP, and the growing factionalism in the UPC, there was the real possibility that the UPC would be out of power in months. Obote went after Kabaka Yeka with a new Act of Parliament in early 1966 that blocked any attempt of Kabaka Yeka to expand outside Uganda. The KY appeared to respond in Parliament through one of their new remaining MPs, the terminally ill Daudi Ocheng. Ocheng was an irony, although from northern Uganda, he had risen high in the ranks of the Kabaka Yeka and became a close confidant to the Kabaka, who had gifted him with large land titles in Uganda. In Obote's absence from Parliament, Ocheng laid bare the illegal plundering of ivory and gold from the Congo that had been orchestrated by Obote's army chief of staff, Colonel Idi Amin. He further alleged that Obote, Onama, and Nekiyon had all benefited from the scheme. Parliament overwhelmingly voted in favor of a motion to censure Amin and investigate Obote's involvement. This shook the government and raised tension in the country. Kabaka Yeka further demonstrated his ability to challenge Obote from within his party at the UPC Buganda conference, where Godfrey Benai, the Attorney General, was ousted by a faction believed to have the backing of Kabaka Yeka, Ibingra, and other anti-Obote elements in Uganda. We talk about dirty politics in central Uganda at that time, involving the Baganda, the Kabaka Yeka, the DP, and the UPC. Obote's response was to arrest Lingara and other ministers at a cabinet meeting and to assume special powers in February 1966. In March 1966, Obote also announced that the offices of President and Vice President would cease to exist, effectively dismissing the Kabaka. Obote also gave Amin more power, giving him the army commander position over the previous holder of Polot, who had a relation to Uganda through marriage, possibly believing Opolot would be reluctant to take military action against the Kabaka if it came to that. Obote abolished the constitution and effectively suspended election due in a few months. So when we say Obote suspended the constitution, it was actually the parliament of Uganda which did that. So there was a vote in parliament, there was a procedure. People disagreed about the manner of process, but it was an emergency process. And there was also a coup plot in Uganda, which this material is not probably mentioning. Kabaka was actually importing firearms from Britain and other parts of the world. There was a clear intelligence pointing to a coup plot by the Uganda kingdom and the rest of the opposition party. They were resorting to military force. So there was actually a security crisis, a national crisis. That's why Dr. Apollo Milton Obote responded constitutionally to make fifth changes. So Obote went on television and radio to accuse the Kabaka of various offenses, including requesting foreign troops, which appears to have been explored by the Kabaka following the rumors of Amin plotting. In practice, Kabaka was not actually an authority to make arrangements for military aid. That was actually the function of the Prime Minister. Obote further dismantled the authority of the Kabaka by announcing, among other measures, the abolition of independent public service commissions for federal units, the removal of Kabaka's authority to appoint civil services servants in Uganda, the abolition of the Uganda High Court, removing the judicial authority the Kabaka had, the bringing of Uganda financial management under further control, and the abolition of lands for Uganda chiefs. Land is one of the key sources of Kabaka's power over his subjects. The lines were now drawn for a showdown between Uganda and the central government. Historians may argue about whether this could have been avoided through compromise. This was unlikely, as Obote now felt emboldened and saw the Kabakas as weak. Indeed, by accepting the presidency 4 years earlier and siding with the United UPC, the Kabaka had divided his people and taken the side of one against the other. Within the Uganda political institution, rivalry driven by religion and personal ambition made the institution ineffective and unable to respond to the central government move. The Kabaka was often regarded as aloof and was unresponsive to advice from the younger Uganda politicians who better understood the new post-independence politics, unlike the traditionalists who were ambivalent to what was going on as long as their traditional beliefs were maintained. The Kabaka favored the new traditionalists. In May 1966, the Kabaka made his move. He asked for foreign help, and the Uganda parliament demanded that the Uganda government leave Uganda, including the capital, Kampala. In response, Obote ordered Idi Amin to attack the Kabaka palace. The battle for the Kabaka's palace was fierce, the Kabaka's guards putting up more resistance than had been expected. Why was the Kabaka able to fight the government of Uganda? Because it had a standing army and a lot of firearms into the palace. There was a security breach, in my opinion, which is the responsibility of the government, the weakness of Dr. Milton Obote and the UPC government, and also poor intelligence. Although Obote publicly rejected the accusation that he ordered, he said he did not order Amin to attack Kabaka, but the opposition party were the ones actually making this claim, and they pushed the accusation to the point of Obote as a commander-in-chief was responsible anyway. He was responsible, and that is Uganda. The battle for the Kabaka's palace was fierce, the Kabaka's guards putting up more resistance than had been expected. The British trained captain, the Kabaka, with about 120 armed men, kept Idi Amin at bay for 12 hours. It is estimated that up to 2,000 people died in the battle, which ended when the army pulled in heavy guns and overran the palace. The anticipated countryside uprising in Uganda did not materialize, and now a few hours later, a beaming Obote met the press to relish the victory. The Kabaka escaped over the palace walls and was transported into exile into London by supporters. He died there 3 years later. Looking back at history, I think Obote was actually weak. In terms of security, he would have dealt very more drastically with renegades like the Kabaka, because Uganda was a very weak, new state. Actually, Africa was very new, and the civil infrastructure to control power up to this day is actually missing. That's why the current president now used to be the military power, actually, it's a military dictatorship to run the country, and in a sense, that's why he stayed for over 40 years, over 30 years, approaching now 40 years in power. And it created the stability needed for the country, but also at the cost of democracy as understood in the world, and also the severe ruining of the Ugandan economy. As we look at the 1966 and 1971 before the coup, in 1966, following a power struggle between the Obote-led government and King Mutesa, Obote suspended the constitution and removed the ceremonial president and vice president. It wasn't Obote, it was the parliament of Uganda, which actually, through a parliamentary process, probably a lot of people disagree with the process, but that was actually a parliamentary procedure. In 1967, a new constitution proclaimed Uganda a republic and abolished the traditional kingdom. Obote was declared president. In 1971, after the coup, up to 1979, the end of Amin's regime, the history of Uganda between 1971 and 1979. After military coup on the 25th of January 1971, Obote was deposed from power and General Idi Amin seized control of the country. This was actually a collusion between the Kabaka supporters, the Bantu, the Baganda people, the DP, and some elements within the UPC colluded actually when Obote was out of the country, for the government. It was a security breach, and I believe it was negligence of the president Obote at that time, who failed the country and also his own political fortunes and that of the party. Amin ruled Uganda as a dictator with the support of the military for the next 8 years. He carried out mass killings within the country to maintain his rule. There was rumors that Israel and Britain were responsible as the co-conspirators to manage that military coup, and that was also rumors which actually characterizes African or maybe be it post-colonial countries where the Europeans in particular actually, and also part of the developed world, interfering in the Africa's internal politics and economy and society. So he carried out mass killing. An estimated 80,000 to 500,000 Ugandans died during each regime. Now, this is the kind of violence associated with military coups and military dictatorship, which is still happening up now, not only in Uganda but across Africa. But I think it is also spreading now in other parts of the world, including places like Ukraine, between Ukraine and China, for example, and Russia, for example. Aside from his brutality, he forcibly removed the entrepreneurial Indian minority from Uganda. In June 1976, Palestinian terrorists hijacked an Air France flight and forced it to land at the Tebe airport. One 100 of the 250 passengers originally on board were held hostage until Israeli commandos rescued them 10 days later. Amid's reign was ended after the Uganda-Tanzania War in 1979, in which Ugandan forces aided by Ugandan exiles invaded Uganda. Between 1979 to the present, history of Uganda between 1979 to the present period. Belligerents of the Second Congo War. On the 19th December 2005, the International Court of Justice found against Uganda in a case brought by the Democratic Republic of the Congo, for illegal invasion of its territory and the violation of human rights. In 1980, the Ugandan Bush War broke out, resulting in Yoweri Museveni becoming president since his forces toppled the previous regime in January 1986. Political parties in Uganda were restricted in their activities beginning that year in a measure ostensibly designed to reduce sectarian violence. In the non-party movement system instituted by Museveni, political parties continued to exist, but they could operate only headquarters office. They could not open branches or rallies or field candidates directly, although electoral candidates could belong to political parties. So we're looking at Uganda and Ugandan politics in the contemporary sense of the word. In 1993, Pope John Paul II visited Uganda during a six-day pastoral trip to urge Ugandans to seek reconciliation. During mass celebration, he paid homage to the slain Christian martyrs. His presidency has been marred, however, by invading and occupying the Democratic Republic of the Congo during the Second Congo War, resulting in an estimated 5.4 million deaths since 1998, and by participating in other conflicts in the Great Lake region of Africa. Now, if people continue to die in conflict in their millions in Africa, then you see a world where Africans are treated like animals, because nowhere else in the world people can die in their millions during a conflict, and the world stands still, and that's nothing else if Africans are not human. He has struggled for years in the civil war against the Lord Resistance Army, which has been guilty of numerous crimes against humanity, including child slavery, the Achak massacres, and the other mass murderers. Conflict in northern Uganda has killed thousands and displaced millions. Parliament abolished presidential term limits in 2005, allegedly because Museveni used public funds to pay US dollar $2,000 to each member of parliament who supported the measure. Presidential elections were held in February 2006. Museveni ran against several candidates, the most prominent of them being Kizza Besigye. On the 20th February 2011, the Ugandan Electoral Commission cleared the incumbent President Yoweri Museveni, the winning candidate of the 2011 election that were held on the 8th of February 2011. The opposition, however, were not satisfied with the result, condemning them as full of sham and rigging. According to the official result, Museveni won with 68% of the votes. Now, if the world is to be believed, if democracy were to be talked of, how can somebody stay in power, one person staying in power, for over 30 years, or now approaching 40 years, being elected? Something must be wrong with democracy, something must be wrong with Africa, something must be wrong with Uganda. That doesn't happen anywhere around the world. It doesn't happen in America, it doesn't happen in Europe, but the world allows it to happen in Africa. Africa in the global scene is treated like dog. See, I don't know who treat Africa as dogs, But African people treat themselves as though because they're culturally, like I said in all my videos, they're culturally uneducated. So the world, including the West and the East, the developed world and Africa are culturally uneducated. You can't keep fighting and killing each other in. I mean, are we barbarians or what? When are we going to have peace in Africa, in Uganda? And we are still talking about the cost of living. These are actually the reason there is poverty. And I said that poverty is the one causing the cost of living, and it is going to continue. And people should be aware of this. We need to be culturally educated, which means we prioritize, we put value on people. Right now, we see someone like Museveni seems to be thinking about money and power, and there is rumor that he's worth over 13 billion US dollars. His wife is worth nearly 700 million US dollars. Where do they get the money from? Of course, they don't steal it because they are not thieves. So there must be something wrong with the system of capitalism, which concentrates money among people into the hands of those in power and among the few and not the many. That's the characteristical status of capitalism, and that is being operated in Uganda and across the globe, including the rest of Africa. And that type of wealth being the product of violence. You can call it anything you like, but it's this lack of cultural learning. Because there are so many poor people in Uganda, there are so many poor people in Africa, and you have a few individuals extremely rich. And if you don't dare to ask them to get the money from, if they even admit they have the money. So, what do we say? This easily toppled his nearest challenger, basically, who had been Museveni's physician, and told reporters that he and his supporters downrightly snubbed the outcome, as well as the meeting rule of Museveni or any other person he may appoint. Basically, added that the rigged election would definitely lead to an illegitimate leadership that and that it is up to Ugandans to critically analyze it. I think people like Besigye were swallowing their own pills, because he is one of the rebels who terrorized Uganda during Milton Obote's government. They are the ones responsible for a lot of problems in Uganda, where they ran into the bush to fight an illegal war. These people, including Mr. Museveni, should be tried to prison, but the war is unhatched in that it doesn't really make. There are people who are actually above the law, because Uganda is being supported by the West, America, Europe, to do their dirty work of promoting capitalism in Africa. Capitalism is dirty not because capitalism is dirty, because the people who are in power are dirty in the sense of neglecting people. That's why there's a cost of living crisis. That's why I'm talking. So that people should change. Good people should be in power. We don't want rude people like Museveni, like leaders in Europe. They should change. Education should actually promote people who are good, who value people, who are not always fighting, talking violent. Museveni remained in power by fighting wars of attrition, futile wars, murdering so many people in government and also government when he was in opposition in Luero. And you can't say it. The same with Europe. You can't say it. The same in Ukraine. You can't say it because they are barbarians. These modern leaders, not just in Uganda but in Africa. Because if they were humans, they would be bringing peace in Africa. They would be bringing peace in Europe. These modern leaders are barbarians. They are not fit to govern. Mr. Museveni is not fit to govern. The rest of African leaders are not fit to govern as long as they allow violence, poverty, the cost of living, Ebola, and all this rubbish about failure of social services, including education, healthcare. In Africa, Africa is a ticking bomb now. You see, I know it's a sweeping statement, but it just show how bad things are in Africa, how bad things are under capitalism. And the situation must change. Otherwise, we are going to have a lot of problems. around the world, not just in Uganda. I'm just looking at Uganda as an example of what is happening in Africa and in the world as well. Because this problem is global, it's not just in Uganda. Basically added that the re-election will definitely lead to an illegitimate leadership, and that it is up to Ugandans to critically analyze this. He should analyze it because he is part of the problem. He is swallowing his bitter pill because he's created the problem. When he become, today they would be modern day terrorists. At that time at least they were called armed opposition, armed rebels or bandits, whoever they were. The European Union's election observer mission reported on improvements and flaws of the Ugandan electoral process. The electoral campaign and polling day were conducted in a peaceful manner. The EU cannot, the European electoral observers cannot be trusted because they are conspiracy of Mr. Museveni to rig elections, and not even rigging elections really, to conspire to bring dictators like Museveni through military coup to promote by default, to force capitalism on Africa. And this is actually a problem in Africa. It is part of the conspiracy theory, which does not have any substantive, doesn't have any conventional evidence, because the evidence are hidden anyway. So there's no need to ask for evidence. You need to provide one because you don't find it. These people operate like mafias. So they shouldn't even have an audacity to ask for evidence. People are free to say what they want to say without evidence, because it is foolish to ask people to provide evidence when you have actually hidden the evidence. Like in Uganda, the government controls everything. In Europe, the same. In Britain here, the same. The government is in full control. It releases information on its own terms. So what kind of democracy is that? It's backward, and it is creating problems like the cost of living crisis. I'm sticking with the cost of living crisis not because I'm trying to be pedantic or something, but I'm just trying to use one crisis to illustrate what is a major problem which needs to be solved. The reason why I'm focusing on the problem because I want solution. It's our livelihood, our destiny, is our survival requirements. That is the whole point. However, the electoral process was marred by avoidable administrative and logistic failures that led to an unacceptable number of Ugandan citizens being disenfranchised. That is a lie. Because you see, one man cannot be that good. In a democracy, one politician cannot be as good as President Museveni to win election for 30 years. The European Union and the mothers and fathers of democracy in the world should be ashamed of themselves, of lying to the world, of being backward and of being brutal. Anybody in the world who stays for 20 years, 30 years is a dictator, including in the Western world. When Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party overstayed in power in Britain, commentators were rightly describing British politics as producing elective dictatorship. And that is not happening. The Conservative Party have been in government for over 12 years. That is an elective dictatorship. Democracy should not work like that at all. There is nothing the Conservative Party has to merit it overstaying in power for 20 years. It is a failed system. It's a system of robbery and a system of theft. Especially given those who are in power are culturally bankrupt. There is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with capitalism. There is nothing wrong with democracy if it is practiced. People who are in power around the world are actually wizards and witches, because they do not know anything to do with culture. They do not respect people. They are violent. They are murderers. That's why people die. People don't die. In Israel, look at Israel now. How many people are going to die? Yeah, Ukraine. When are we going to have peace? People are still dying in the Congo. If the system is working, why are people dying? Or are people not important? I mean, that is what I say to mean when I say, that's what I mean when I say cultural bankruptcy is the problem. These people who are keen on ruling the world should go back to school and learn about cultural education, valuing people first. And if we don't do that now, we are going to be history, humanity, I mean to say. It doesn't matter what your name is, whether you are Rishi Sunak in the UK, whether you are King Charles as King of England, whoever your name is, President of America, in Russia, China, Ukraine, Middle East, Israel, wherever you are, Museveni in Uganda, in Kenya. We are all in this together. We need peace. We need our culture back. These politicians should stop being drunk with human blood. People are dying and that is wrong. You see, there is no price worth paying with human blood. And this has been going for decades, When is this going to stop? You have to stop and learn the value of humanity. Otherwise, let us shut down the government and go back into Stone Ages. If you think you're in power and you are rich, you're going to survive, you're wrong. Because the same violence killing poor people now are going to kill rich people. Which means there are two types of people, rich and poor. Both are going to die, so humanity are going to go extinct. We cannot just sit here and pretend it's business as usual. It is not. Capitalism is not the problem. The people in power are the problem. And this has nothing to do with rich people or people in power. It has to do with human condition, which I propose that especially people in power being more responsible than people outside of power. If you are in power, if you are outside of power, pay attention to humanity. Start reevaluating the culture of humanity. We cannot go on like this. I'm not saying poor people are better than rich people. They're just poor. And poverty is created by capitalism because the people managing capitalism are evil people. Evil in the sense that they allow people to suffer the cost of living crisis. They allow people to suffer poverty. If the global world, the global population, global citizens were out, all of them were out of poverty, there would be no the cost of living crisis. And that's why I seem to be, pedantic talking about the cost of living up and again, because it's evident that we do not think. We are so dumb as people. Whether you're in power, whether you're not in power, whether you're rich or poor, we need to come together and start thinking again. Because you see, we cannot carry on with violence, rich or poor. But if you are rich, you should know you're more violent than a poor person. Because, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Wealth and power gets into your head and you become even more barbarian. More of a barbarian. So to say, this is not a joke. Since August 9, 2020, activist group Anonymous has threatened Ugandan officials and hacked official government website over its anti-gay bills. Some international donors have threatened to cut financial aid to the country if anti-gay bills continue. Indicators of a plan for succession by the President's son Muhoozi Kainerugaba have increased tension. The reason the President of Uganda is shutting up gay bill, and this is a rumor, that because he thinks some politicians who he feels are threatening his government are gay. Some politicians in Uganda's government, in Uganda are homosexuals. That is what the rumor says, that he suspects some members of the politician he considered to be a real threat to his power. It is rumored that some of these opposition are actually homosexual. It is not the case that they are homosexual, and it is not authenticated, but that is the rumor. And in Uganda, what is rumor, and in Africa, what is rumor, or even in the world, conspiracy theories are actually conspiracies. And so it is likely that it is a political decision. It is one of the strategies of President Museveni to cling onto power in Uganda. He doesn't hate homosexuals. Most people don't hate Museveni. It's an excuse to oppress the people of Uganda as a dictator for dictatorial reasons. And the West know about that, but the West are also playing politics with people, because Museveni is doing their dirty work of promoting the evil aspect of capitalism, which keeps the poor, rich, and promote warfare. Violence is a means of political maneuvering, especially in Africa. We show it in Northern Ireland and across, in the Falklands with the United Kingdom. We saw it, not to mention the First and the Second World Wars and all the events of the Cold War. How evil do we want to be? And this is not just one country, not just about one person, it's about humanity. We, the people, are we insane? Why are we killing each other? And it has to stop. We need to go back home and learn our culture. Whether you're a president, whether you're a farmer, whether you're poor or rich, you have a responsibility to bring peace. Go and learn the value of humanity and come back and talk about it. We have Google, we have whatever. Use it to talk about humanity. We have to value people first. We run after money, we run after wealth, and people are now dying. Even in Africa, people lie there down. People are sitting here eating and drinking. Are we savages or what? And this is not just to accuse one person or another. We are responsible, but if you're in a position of power like President Museveni, you have to take more responsibility, because you are more privileged than anybody in Uganda. So President Museveni has ruled the country since 1986, and he was latest re-elected in January 2021 in the presidential election. According to the official result, Museveni won the election with 58% of the vote, while a post-turned politician, pop star turned politician Bobby Wine, 35%. The opposition challenged the result of the allegation of widespread fraud and irregularities. Well, sound familiar to me. Another opposition candidate was 24-year-old John Katumba. More of the same in Uganda. We are going to stop this video here. We're going to look at the geography of Uganda. The next time we meet, thank you for coming with us this far. If you have subscribed to this channel, leave a comment below. The subject I am pursuing is hard to deal with. There's a lot of controversy because a lot of people are suffering because of living crisis. And personally, I don't think that is right. I think it is completely wrong. I think the authorities have to stop and think about, especially people in the developed world, because they have more power than people in Africa. They are responsible for the world peace, for the world and for world peace more than African countries. And the big guys will always take, they have to take the lion's share of responsibility, and the smaller guys in Africa, including in Uganda, should take the lesser responsibility. The cost of living is wrong, and it's the product of poverty. The developed countries should get poor people out of poverty immediately, and this cost of living should be stopped. We need to strengthen the public sector and provide the public services via the public sector, and let us don't make a fool of ourselves about privatizing public sector. Private sector is not designed to provide public service, period. And that's why public service is failing. The National Health Service in Britain is not working. The health services across the globe is not working, including in Uganda, because of privatization. It is a form of madness. It's like modern leaders are high on drugs, on really nasty drugs, drunk with it, like hopeless criminals. This cannot be allowed to continue. The people who think they have a voice, use the opportunity in whatever you like to speak out. We need to value you people more over power and wealth and influence. And that is the precise source of the problem. Because we now kill people like people. Even wild animals are arrested. Humans are being murdered left, right, center. Across the globe, not just in Uganda, not just in one country. Look at Niger. Look at South Sudan. Look at even Sudan. It's the nonsense about Arab Spring. There is nothing like Arab Spring. It's Arab winter, or even worse than winter. People are dying. And that is the bottom line. They don't deserve to die. Oh, they don't deserve to die more than the rest of the world. Everybody who is alive, if we think one section of our humanity deserves to die, then we equally deserve to die. And I believe that is a wrong assessment. No human deserves to die at all, unless they deserve to die, of course. And I'm not talking about the law, because the law is what it is. It's a brutal instrument. The rich and the powerful are above the law. The law is an instrument of slavery by the ruling class, or the one ruled over by the slave. In other words, the citizens are actually slaves of the masters who rule over them, typically in Uganda. Museveni in Uganda is treated more than God. Actually, Ugandans have forgotten about God altogether until maybe Museveni leaves power, then to remember that they is God. And this is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to give your president respect and the glory he deserves, but he actually deserves it by valuing the life of. I mean, how many people died because of Museveni? Because of politicians in Uganda, because of politicians in Africa, because of politicians across the globe. Countless. And it is getting worse. The mode of death, of potential extinction, the operation is changing in form, in context. Thank you for watching this video, and subscribe to my channel and continue sharing it with family and friends. And I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.